Hello, my dear audiences. Welcome to the show, Jack Chow on the East West Show with G&E TV. About a week ago, we had a show. We had a bunch of lawyers here to talk about death penalty, facing the issues where people find themselves caught in between. On one hand, we hear people calling about the abolish of death penalty, and on the other, we have people calling for that quote unquote, such as from Governor of Louisiana saying that we need to kill more people. So where are we? What should we do? Regarding the death penalty, and now since last month, starting even this week, we are hearing concentratedly on two cases. One, the Boston Marathon killer, right? And then starting this week, we're talking about the killer, James Holmes of the Colorado Theater. Well, personally, I have the emotion that I wish I can strangle them myself, but we have a law to go by, so we have lots of legality there. So today we're thinking about putting all these together to try to bring an overall picture over the term called death penalty to our audiences. For that, as my rule, my iron rule, that I always bring my crying baby to the mother. The mother today being Mia Yamamoto, attorney at law, a special, I should say, an expert on death penalty issues. So you're welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate being here.
All right.
Thank you for asking me here. I'm anxious to talk about the death penalty. I think it's a very important issue. Mm-hmm. I think that people care very deeply about it on both sides of the issue, and I appreciate the fact and the opportunity to come here and talk about it.
All right, and I believe my audience is all flattered. Today we seem to be talking on the right issue with the right person. Right? So,
thank you.
Okay, now first let's start with the James Holmes case, right? And we heard from the news he was found guilty on all the 156 counts. And starting next Wednesday, we'll be talking about how we shall sentence him, right? So what's your reading or understanding or from a professional point of view about the case, please?
The Colorado shooter case, the James Holmes case, involved a man who basically did one of the most horrible things you can imagine. He walked into a theater, heavily armed. He had prepared for the attack for a long time in advance, and that's been documented in the trial. Mm-hmm. And so it was a very difficult case. From the point of view of the lawyers, they had to question the sanity of anybody who would do such a horrible thing in such a random fashion. Mm-hmm. And if you saw pictures of the man who did this, you could see that this man was not in any way normal. I think part of the problem is the horror of what was done sometimes overrides whatever defense considerations are valid with respect to a crime. For instance, in this case, the defense attorneys tried to say that this man was not guilty by reason of insanity.
Yes.
That he was crazy, and that was the reason why he did what he did. And I think that it's very difficult for a jury to feel as though that's enough for them to mitigate the horror of what was done. And I think that in this case, the death penalty looks like it's the odds-on favorite. And I'm sure that these defense attorneys are going to fight to the bitter end against the death penalty. But I have to say that they're operating at a disadvantage because the victims are so sympathetic, and there is so much outrage at the horror of what was done.
I understand that you have been a defense attorney on the defendant side for many times. They do that for a living, and for us to hear a statement like what you said just now, I would say that would be convincing enough, right?
Well, from my point of view. I don't really believe that there is any case that is beyond redemption. I don't believe there's any person, any human being who is beyond redemption, and especially somebody as young as this person, and especially someone who is as mentally impaired as he is. It may not be enough to save him, but I believe that it's wrong to kill someone once you realize that this person is operating under the forces that are beyond his control. And his whole life story will be told in the next month to talk to this jury about trying to exercise their legal choice to give him a penalty of life without parole. And I might say this, that life without parole means exactly what it says. That means that this man will die in prison, however many years it takes for him to die. But in this sense, he will be dying a natural death. And it won't be up to us as a society to pull the trigger on him to execute this man. And in that point, from my point of view, I think it would be the right thing to do to exercise some measure of leniency and even mercy in order to demonstrate that we as a society believe that killing people is wrong, that we believe that all life should be valued and cherished, and that we have to set an example that we are not going to lower ourselves to the level of this murderer and take his life and demonstrate to him and to the rest of the world that there is an element of what he did that we agree with.
All right, that's exactly the point, a very, very strong point. And I would like later on to develop from that point on, right? So while we still can, let's stick to his case though.
Yes.
What would be your professional expectation, or kind of like just a guess, make it rough, what's his supreme as punishment, or what's his most bottom line?
From my point of view as a defense attorney, of course, the ultimate failure by the defense would be the death verdict, that the inability to convince the jury that the moral high road that we take is to make a stand against the death penalty and to say that this has to stop somewhere and it can stop here. And that we're not doing the victims' families any good. If you think you're going to get closure by killing this man, in my experience, that has not been the case.
I see.
People are still bitter. The loss is still there. Nothing makes up for it by killing someone.
Okay. The same strategy or same logic of thinking, if stretched to cover the Boston Marathon case killer, though. So, do you think that will apply?
Well, let me just say this: Dzhokhar Tsarnaev has already been sentenced to death, and that means that the process is already run its course in that case. I don't personally believe that he should have gotten the death penalty, but I understand why he got it. I can understand, again, that was a highly publicized case, and there was a great deal of anger against Tsarnaev because it was a terrorist act as well. And it had political overtones, that he was advancing a political cause which is antithetical to the American society, American community. And so, of course, people felt that was an attack on all of America. Whereas, with respect to the Colorado shooter, he was not motivated by any such political ideology. It was simply probably operating from
decided to shoot.
Right, but I think in his particular case, it was impossible to ignore. Even if the jury discounted it, I think they acknowledged this man had mental health issues and that he was schizophrenic. The question was always, was that enough
to convince the juror?
To convince the jury,
and also the prosecutors, right?
To exercise mercy.
Yeah, I see. Now that we say, of course, we know Tsarnaev has been convicted, and the death sentence is going to be the conclusion, right? But thing is that to compare the severities, though, the damage, you're talking about 12 plus 70 versus 2, 3, 4 in an event. So do we, as a law, in the eye of law, value cases in a way like that, in a sense like that?
I think the first objective measure of the severity of a crime does depend to some extent on the number of victims. But I think it's impossible to quantify the horror or the level of the crime by virtue, especially for purposes of the death penalty, because there is an irrationality to people get the death penalty for a single murder all the time. It's very common in places that had the death penalty, but there is no additional punishment for a second murder, or 20 of them, or 70 of them. And there's no way to calibrate or calculate what the appropriate measure of punishment would be, for instance, for a terrorist that drops an atomic bomb on New York City. Millions of lives can be taken, and is the death penalty enough? And you look at it from that point of view,
Yeah.
and it's almost an irrational
Obviously, you cannot
analysis.
kill him 1,000,000 times,
And
right?
and it's impossible, and it points to the absurdity of the death penalty because, of course, if we could bring back the victims, every defense attorney would say, kill him. If it
Okay.
would bring them back, but it's not going to do that, and I feel as though it's going to cheapen society even that much more when we take this man's life. Clarence Darrow once said, if we want to keep people from being murderers and tell them it's wrong, maybe we should stop killing people.
I see. All right. That exactly was the question we raised the last time when we had the discussion with the two of my attorney friends.
Yes.
They seem to tilt on my side, saying that probably we should consider. However, we have a constitution to think about, and we have the right to think about the right of victim and also the right of the perpetrators. Right. So, do you think by applying to Constitution would be a right approach?
Absolutely. We live in a legal system and in a society that respects the Constitution, that governs us as a people, and every lawyer takes an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And anybody who wants to disregard the Constitution, to do whatever they feel like doing, is wrong. Because that Constitution governs us, it protects us. It's the reason why we are proud to call ourselves Americans, because we are governed by principle and not by expediency, not by emotion, and even theoretically not by politics. It should be a matter of principle, it should be a matter of our values and those ideals which we have committed ourselves to.
So, my dear audience, today is one of the very chance we got to this opportunity to talk to a professional, to face with the challenge about death penalty over two cases, two standard cases. That stands for most evil part, right? Should we be, doing the same thing by killing as punishment to bring justice back, or justice could be brought back in a different way? So we are talking about those high-end legality issue and also a philosophical, I call it that way.
Of course.
With me today is my good friend Mia Yamamoto, and death penalty expert with the criminal defense, and she does that for a living. And by the way, she was born in the concentration camp back then in Arizona. Well, we can see as a living example how big a difference history can make. Right?
It does.
Yeah, all right. So let's take a short moment out. When we come back, we'll continue finding more with cases. But stay with us.